So what we're going to spend the next 25 minutes on is really some of the results and trends coming out of our entertainment and media outlook. It covers consumer and advertising spend, got 5-year historic information, 2010 through till 2014, and 5-year forecast information, 2015 through till 2019. 3 countries in our outlook: South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya, and across the 11 segments that you can see on the screen there. But before we get into those markets, I'd like to just take a step back and get a little bit of a global perspective. And what this slide tries to capture is the 54 markets that make up our global entertainment and media outlook, and really classifies them according to 2 characteristics: market size and growth prospects. In the mature market quadrant, we've got countries that are obviously significant in terms of entertainment and media market size. You'll see that in aggregate, they are almost double the other 3 quadrants added together. Next wave are those markets which are starting to gain significance from an individual size perspective, but are much faster growing. You'll see there a compound annual growth rate over the forecast period of 8.8%. The next quadrant there, the up-and-comers, the pink, these are markets that also exhibit very high growth rate, but not quite the same size as the next wave. So I suppose the opportunities within those markets not as immediately scalable as the ones you would see in the next wave. And this is where our 3 territories in our outlook sit: South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria. And slow growing, not really the markets you want to be in, markets that are obviously small in size and also lag from a growth prospect perspective. So looking at those in a little bit more detail, we can see some of the countries that form part of the various quadrants. And I'll focus on the up-and-comers because those are where ours are. The first is Nigeria, the fastest growing market globally from an entertainment and media spend perspective, 15.1% over the forecast period. It'll double and exceed $8 billion by 2019. Kenya, 12.9% to reach $3.3 billion. South Africa, the biggest market, growing at 9.4% to reach $16.7 billion. And then I've added some of the Middle East territories in here, just to give you a sense as to relative size and growth rates. The first, the UAE, forecast to reach $4.8 billion at a growth rate of 7.5%. Saudi Arabia, a little bit slower, but a bigger market, forecast to reach $10 billion US dollars. And then the rest of Middle East and North Africa, forecast to grow at 9.3% to reach 14.5. Obviously, that is a conglomerate of markets. So what's driving this growth? I think that's probably the biggest question. And the main reason behind it is growth in internet access spend. And that's both mobile and broadband. Now, some of you may say, well, surely internet access is not an entertainment and media segment per se, so why have you included it within your forecast? And for us, we've included it because it's a leading indicator of entertainment and media consumer spend, and also it's the fastest growing platform with respect to internet advertising. So we believe it's a key driver of entertainment and media spend, and that's why we've included it. And what this slide looks to show is just the correlation that we're seeing between growth in mobile and broadband internet access spend and the growth in the entertainment and media market. We see that trend coming through very strongly with our 3 markets that we've got here. But what's important to note is, although we are seeing growth in the mobile space, in the broadband space, it's very much a mobile story in Africa. The growth from a mobile internet access perspective in Africa dwarfs the growth that we see in broadband. And here we continue the story. So from a mobile internet penetration perspective, we'll see that a lot of these territories have risen significantly. We see Nigeria, Kenya, from a virtually standing start in 2010, they forecast to reach 31 and 35% in coming years. South Africa, 37%, that'll grow by more than 32 points over the forecast period to reach 69% from a penetration perspective. What's driving that growth? Well, really the proliferation in smart devices. South Africa smartphone connections are going to grow. They're around 23 million at the moment. That's going to more than double to around 52 million in 2019. Tablets, 2.6 million up to 5.6 million. So it's that growth that's really driving this increased internet penetration. And I think few would argue about the role that affordable internet access has had in driving the digital transformation that we're seeing in the entertainment and media space. But I think it's the way that it will continue to disrupt the market that shouldn't be underestimated. Affordable internet access, though, at a high level, may actually start to inhibit some of the growth that we're seeing within some of the segments. And why do I say that? Well, really, internet access spend starts to compete with entertainment and media dollars. And we've certainly got a bit of maturity that we need to reach within the African market. A lot of African consumers feel that once they've paid for the access, they don't need to pay for the content. And clearly that's not a good position to be in from a content provider perspective. So monetization is certainly one of the key challenges, and we've had lots of discussion on that earlier this morning. And it remains a key challenge within the African environment. But if one looks around, there are examples elsewhere, around the world in terms of how magazines have monetized that. And certainly if one looks at other models, a Spotify, a Netflix, they've created sizable audiences, online audiences, but more important, sizable paying online audiences to actually deliver their content. So very much a mobile story, and I think with that in mind, I'd like to get into a little bit more detail with regard to the individual territories that we cover in the outlook. So the first is South Africa. We've had double-digit growth over all of the years that we've been doing the outlook. We grew 11.5% in the 2014 year, but that double-digit growth is going to come to an end during 2016 in terms of our forecast, but still forecast to grow at a very good rate of 9.4% to reach that $16.7 billion mark. In terms of the market overall, from an advertising perspective, internet advertising obviously very fast growing, but we do still see the traditional advertising will continue to dominate. Newspaper and TV advertising accounted for around 52% of the market in 2014. We expect that only to drop to around 51% by 2019. We're approaching an interesting tipping point within the South African market. So by 2019, we forecast that total digital spend within the market will reach 49.6%. So as early as 2020, we could see total digital spend actually overtaking our traditional spend. And we see this coming through in a number of the segments as well. So digital recorded music is going to surpass physical recorded music sales. Electronic home video is going to overtake your traditional home video. And there is one other category, which has now skipped my mind. Casual and social gaming. Casual and social gaming, so mobile gaming, which I think is very consistent with that mobile story, we are going to see that overtaking your traditional gaming revenue. So we are seeing this mobile trend very strongly within the South African market. Another trend that we're seeing is the consumption of video-based content. So if we take from a consumer spend perspective, if we lump TV subscription revenue, filmed entertainment, and video games, they will add about $0.4 billion in growth over the forecast period. We compare that to print, so that's newspapers, magazines, and books. They're only going to add around $0.1 billion over the forecast period. So this increase in video-based content is another trend that we're seeing in South Africa, but also very strongly on a global basis. If we go on to the magazine publishing market specifically within South Africa, we see that we've got a compound annual growth rate there of 2.9%. Market's going to move from around $871 million to just over the $1 billion mark in 2019. Consumer magazines dominate the market. They are forecast to grow around 2.7%. Trade magazines a bit smaller, slightly higher growth rate, 4.8%. And I think while digital is on the rise, print still remains king. One of the ongoing challenges, I think, within the market, and we're not always that mature, and we've seen a lot of the initial sort of approach that some magazines have taken is, to just have sort of a replica, a PDF replica, and to say, well, we've gone digital. I think all of us realize that we've moved beyond that, and the real opportunity is for magazines to move into that interactive space, where you actually become part of the whole e-commerce and m-commerce revolution. And if you can get that interactive aspect into your magazines, well, that's obviously clearly value adding. And that we feel will drive the digital growth, which currently we're seeing, or the digital composition, which we only forecast to grow at around 7.7% through to 2019. We expect that the share of digital revenue will be much higher if we can embrace a lot of those things, both in South Africa and some of the other markets. If we skip along to Nigeria here, so Nigeria, as I said, fastest growing, 15.1% to reach around $8 billion US in 2019. Heavily consumer focused. Around 4/5 of the market is consumer spend within Nigeria. A remarkable 82% of the growth that we're going to see in the Nigerian market over the next 5 years, over the forecast period, is going to come from internet access. So heavily driven by, growth in internet access. From a advertising perspective, TV advertising continues to dominate, followed by out-of-home. But internet advertising is going to grow fast over the forecast period, such that it will overtake radio as the third largest advertising category by 2019. If we skip into the magazine publishing within Nigeria, again, it's a consumer magazine dominated market. So forecast to grow 1.3% through to $236 million in 2019. Out of that $219 million is in the consumer magazine space. And out of the $219 million, $210 million is in the consumer print space. So very consumer magazine focused, very print focused. Digital, again, very constrained. And a lot of this, they only forecast to have about a 6% tablet penetration rate in Nigeria in 2019. And this means that a lot of the digital revenues, haven't yet taken off. So from a share of revenue perspective, we are expecting that digital revenues within the Nigerian magazine market will only account for around 3% of the revenues in 2019. We see that print advertising revenues in Nigeria are actually on a decline. We forecast that they're going to decline over the forecast period. So that's print advertising revenues in the consumer magazine space. One of the major drivers behind this is the fact that there are not reliable audited circulation figures within Nigeria. And I think advertisers have long been wary of the circulation figures that have been put out there by publishers. And this is certainly, weighed down on the uptake of marketing spend within the magazine space. If we go into Kenya, our third market, 12.9% growth, going to reach around $3.3 billion in 2019. It is a market that's quite evenly split between advertising and consumer spend. Consumer spend accounted for around 47% of the market in 2019. Internet access, again, a big driver of the growth that we're going to see over the forecast period. And we'll see that tipping point change over the forecast period. By 2019, consumer spend will actually have reached about 54% of the Kenya market. Advertising, internet advertising, growing, but still only forecast to account for about 1/10 of the market in 2019. Your traditional advertising mediums, newspapers, radio, television, continue to dominate. What's happening in the magazine publishing space within Kenya? Growth 3.5%, to move from 76 million up to 91 million. Again, very consumer magazine focused, about 95% of the market, and very print focused within that space. We do see some growth in trade magazines as the Kenyan economy expands, but still relatively small in terms of overall market size. Again, from a digital perspective, only expected to account for about 4.4% of the total market spend in 2019. But Kenya tells me a slightly more interesting story. And we actually look to a parallel print segment to gain these insights. So if we look at the books industry within Kenya, 50% of book revenue in 2019 is estimated to come from digital sources, right? And a lot of people say, well, that's because books can actually be read more efficiently and more easily on a mobile device. So for me, that sort of presents a pretty interesting situation to say that clearly people are consuming content on a mobile device, and we've had lots of discussion about that from everybody today. And Kenyans are willing to do that, and I'm sure other market participants are as well. So the key challenge for me is about magazine publishers, particularly within Africa, being able to optimize their content for a mobile device, because the consumers are willing to consume in that space. But constantly, we're not seeing that showing up in the numbers. We are seeing it in the books numbers. We're not seeing it in the magazine publishing numbers. So if they can hopefully replicate that success, get content which is optimized, and we've had a lot of chat about the optimization of content within the African space, I think we should hopefully see the shift and this acceleration of this digital shift within the magazine space within Africa. So those market numbers are not very rosy. 2.9%, 1.3% growth, 3.5% growth. But I'd like to finish on 2 points. I'd like to consider a couple of hot topics, and then I want to look at what I think entertainment and media companies need to do to be able to be successful in the current environment. The first hot topic is around the next 5 billion consumers. So mobile internet connections outnumber fixed internet connections by about 3 to 1 at the moment. In the next 5 years, mobile internet connections are going to move from 2.6 billion globally to 7.6 billion. That's 5 billion people in the next 5 years. A lot of that growth is going to come from Africa, the Middle East, and other emerging markets. And this represents a significant opportunity and potential audience for content distribution. And that's pretty exciting within the magazine publishing space. How do you capture this opportunity? Well, the first thing is obviously you need to rethink any developed market models that you're going to take into these new markets. The key for success in these markets is to target reach and inclusivity, but at low cost. Clearly, ARPUs and levels of disposable income are not the same in these markets as in other markets around the globe. The second is around measurement, and Peter mentioned this in his chat earlier today. Audiences are largely platform agnostic, and clearly measurement metrics need to be as well. And we've moved in that space. The key to success is not so much the audience figure, but it's about engagement. And PwC and out of our UK office have actually done some pretty interesting stuff in this space. So they've developed a methodology which allows you to both define, measure, and provide assurance over audience engagement. Because ultimately, audience engagement drives effective advertising. And the reason I mention that is that in the highly competitive magazine publishing market, which I think it is, it's exceptionally competitive out there. If you are able to demonstrate as a magazine publisher that you have an engaged audience, as opposed to just a number of unique users, I think that can provide a competitive advantage out there and hopefully attract the attention of additional advertising revenue. So that brings me on to this last point, which is entertainment and media companies and what companies need to do in order to be successful within these current times. And we feel that there are 3 imperatives that we need to focus on. But before I get there, I'd like to just take a step back and just reflect. So we've had about a decade of digital disruption. And what we see is that there's now no significant divide in both the minds and the wallets of consumers between traditional and digital media. Our digital offerings have created a bigger and more diverse content universe. Digital has accelerated delivery across platforms. And what we have now is we have consumers who have more choice and convenience than ever before as to how they access and watch and consume content of any kind. When enabled to do so by the right infrastructure and device, they've consistently demonstrated that they'll migrate towards offerings that combine 2 essential characteristics. One, an outstanding user experience. And what do I mean by that? Well, attractive content assortment, great discovery, and social community. And the second is an intuitive service layer or interface, one that allows access across multiple platforms, but also increased personalization. Now, these consumer-driven dynamics are obviously having transformational effects on entertainment and media companies as they seek to benefit, and as you guys seek to benefit economically from these shifts that are taking place. The challenge is heightened because right now, the consumer has never been more up for grabs than at these current times. Now, amidst this proliferation of content and access choices, what consumers want and what they keep on telling us, and we do consumer interviews as part of our research for this publication, they want freedom and flexibility, but really they want choice as to when and how they consume content of any kind. They don't want schedules, they want it on demand, and increasingly they want it mobile. And again, that's particularly true within the African context. That being said, they are still willing to engage with real-life shared experiences. Experiences which are maybe not as easily obtainable elsewhere, but which more importantly embed them in a rewarding social experience. Hence the ongoing appeal of live concerts, sports events, going to the movies. And it's important to note that these real-life experiences don't just happily coexist alongside their digital alternatives. They've in fact been re-energized by the growth in digital and social media. And I think the magazine publishing space is one that has really embraced this, because we see a lot of diversification in the magazine publishing space in terms of moving from just pure out publishing to combining with and moving into the event space and really making, those real-life shared experiences. So I think this is one that sits very, very well within the magazine publishing space. What's the biggest strategic issue out there for entertainment and media companies? It's how to increase consumer engagement and also monetize it at sufficient scale. Locally relevant, compelling content, certainly a key piece to the puzzle, and it keeps people coming back for more, but it's not enough. There are very new user capability requirements. In the Google chat earlier, right, I really enjoyed that, Alex, thank you for that. People get frustrated if you're on their page for more than 3 seconds, and they're going to leave, right? So the user capability requirements is about offering a user experience that is both differentiated and compelling on the consumer's platform of choice. That, together with the content, is the key piece to the puzzle. These requirements bring us to the 3 imperatives that I've got up on the slide here. The first is to continue to innovate around the product and user experience, to make it one that is more personalized, more engaging, easier to discover, and more flexible, so as to accommodate a range of business models that could be ad-funded, subscription-based, or transaction-based. Second is to stop compartmentalizing consumers by distribution channel. We want to be managed on a more holistic basis. How do you do that? Well, it's richer user profiles. And richer user profiles are driven by deeper data and analytics. But there's one overriding principle. The overriding principle is that you need to create and nurture a trusted relationship with that consumer. The consumer must feel that the information that they've shared with you is both valued and protected by you as the organization that they've given it to. And the third is to put mobile and increasingly video at the center of our consumer offerings. I've just taken my mobile phone out of my pocket, but nobody will debate anymore that that's become the first screen. We saw from the stats earlier, 80% of people, that's the first thing that they look at in the morning. Okay, it's at the heart of our personal proximity and our social network. So in a nutshell, I would say it's time to embrace the fact that mastering the user experience is key to both monetizing the consumer and sustaining growth. We continue to be in an environment in which consumers call the shots.